Welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight, September 25th, for the Berkeley City Council District 5 Candidates Forum. My name is Elise Mills of the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not support or oppose candidates or parties. The advocacy arm of the League may take positions on issues such as ballot measures. However, this forum is presented by the Voter Services and Education arm of the League, which does not take positions or advocate for them. I'd like to remind everyone that the candidates have all agreed to participate under ground rules set for this forum. These ground rules are posted in Eventbrite. Candidates are not permitted to display campaign buttons, t-shirts, signs, Zoom backgrounds, etc., in order to maintain neutrality. We are recording tonight's forum, and the session will be available on our website, lwvbae.org, through votersedge.org/ca, with links on our social media accounts at lwvbae. There are 3 candidates running for Berkeley City Council member for District 5. They are Sophie Hahn, Todd Andrew, and Darwin Picklesimer. On your ballot, you will be able to choose one candidate out of the 3. Now let's go over a few ground rules. Each candidate has 2 minutes for opening remarks. The order was determined by drawing lots. The timekeeper will signal candidates with a green colored window, which will count down the seconds from 2 minutes to 15 seconds to go, when it will turn yellow, and then red when the full 2 minutes is up. As people signed up via Eventbrite, they submitted written questions. If you have additional questions, you may type them in by clicking the Q&A icon. Our volunteers will take the questions and pass them to the moderator. All questions will be screened to avoid duplication and personal attacks. The order of answering the questions will be alternated, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Again, the timekeeper will signal candidates. There will be no separate rebuttals. However, the candidates may choose to use some or all of their 1 minute to rebut the response given by another candidate. Following the questions, each candidate shall have 1 minute for a closing statement. Now let's begin with our City Council District 5 Forum candidate. Each candidate will give an opening statement of 2 minutes, and we will start with Sophie Hahn.
Good evening. 4 years ago, voters overwhelmingly chose me to lead with new energy and vision. And since taking office, I have worked hard to lift up our community, our planet, and our values. I've authored over 80 pieces of legislation and co-sponsored hundreds more, working with every member of the council. My ability to craft innovative solutions that reflect broad stakeholder input has resulted in effective programs to address homelessness, increase affordable housing, and combat climate change and pollution. 2 years ago, I was honored to be elected by my council colleagues to serve as vice mayor. Together, we've broken ground on affordable housing and rehoused over 250 homeless neighbors, rebuilt senior and recreation centers, cleared fire fuels, expanded bike lanes, and strengthened city finances. I authored nationally acclaimed legislation to reduce throwaway plastics, championed green buildings, promoted urban agriculture, and helped bring clean energy to every Berkeley home. These past 4 years, we've faced more challenges than anyone could have imagined. In the face of COVID-19, we are keeping Berkeley safe. I have led efforts to address food and housing insecurity, help struggling renters, and support local schools, arts organizations, and businesses so Berkeley can come back stronger. And answering urgent calls for justice and equality, I've worked with Mayor Adegin and council colleagues to launch a process to re-envision public safety by providing more mental health, crisis intervention, and community services so our police can focus on preventing and solving real crimes. I'm eager to use my experience as District 5's council member and my lifelong dedication to our community and values to continue standing for and standing up for Berkeley. Elise, you're muted. We couldn't hear you.
Yes. Next, we will hear from Darwin Picklesimer.
Thanks, Elise. Well, it's an honor to be here. I'm a newcomer to Berkeley, relatively. I've lived here since 2016. Before that, I was born and raised in West Virginia, and I lived in the suburbs of Chicago for a few years before that. So I come to this race with a pretty bit of a different background and different perspective than some of the other candidates might have, and that's a good thing, I think. I think it's really great that we have a nice range of diversity of people with different ideas, and I really appreciate a lot of the ideas that I've heard from both of the other two candidates who are running. And I look for ways to integrate some of those awesome ideas that they have, and also ways to help support other members on the council do the kind of things that we Berkeley residents want to do. I'm here running under the assumption that the people of Berkeley don't just care deeply about Berkeley itself, but they really want what's best for the entire Bay Area, the entire country, and the entire world. And I know that it's a tall task just to get Berkeley going back in the right direction. And that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of expertise and a lot of collaboration. And I'm here for it. And I want to do that in the spirit of trying to role model what a government can be on the local level, so that other governments can implement that and do the kinds of things that we do. So I'm someone you'll get to know a lot over the next month. This is my first time doing one of these candidate forums. My campaign is only really officially getting off the ground at the end of this month. I had some other commitments that I can't back out of before the end of the month. So I'm really excited to get to know you all. I thank you for your time and for being here. And I'm just really excited to show you what I can do in terms of being a very hard worker. I come from a background of blue collar work. I was in roofing and construction most of my life until I moved to Chicago. I got an entry-level job as a produce clerk making $10 an hour at a high volume grocery store. And then in the next couple of years, I was the manager of that produce department. And before I moved here to the Bay Area, and I've worked really hard to try to advocate for the city of Berkeley and the world through addressing issues like climate change and animal exploitation and just justice in general. So I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Todd Andrew. You're muted, Todd.
That helps. Thanks so much, Elisa, and thank you also to the League of Women Voters for everything they do to educate voters and thereby facilitate democracy locally and in our country. I hope you're all as well as you can be during this crazy time. I grew up in a working class family and moved to the Bay Area in 1988. After going to college on the East Coast from Iowa on work-study loans and work-study income. I'm a 21-year resident of Berkeley, having moved here in 1999 after falling in love to start a family. I'm a tenant and have been most of my life, actually. Today I live at Hopkins in Monterey in North Berkeley in a rent-controlled apartment. I've got two kids who came up through the Berkeley Public Schools and recently graduated from Berkeley High School, which I was so grateful for. And I'm actually pretty proud of my career as a realtor, having given ethical advice and service to my clients over 17 years and helping them move to and from Berkeley and surrounding communities. And though labels are not near as important to me as the truth and results, I do consider myself to be a proud, progressive, pro-choice, pro-labor, pro-environment Democrat in the same vein as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I love our city and its storied history, so it pains me to say that our public policy is broken, and there are lots of data points on that. So one of my first priorities is going to be to shift the focus away from what I see as an ideological purity, which too often results in divisiveness, and toward a more creative problem-solving mentality. I just want to get results for our residents. For instance, our affordable housing crisis demands an all-of-the-above approach, yet the recent housing pipeline report shows a pretty steep decline in the number of units in the last 3 years, and that's an accumulation of a series of policies over the last 8 years. As a homeless commissioner, I can tell you the flagship Stair Center is failing, and we have enormous deficits in our streets and other infrastructure and pension obligations of around $700 million each. To overcome these hurdles and meet new challenges like increased wildfire risks and other climate risks, business as usual just is no longer an option. Now more than ever, we need to re-examine not just public safety and policing, but bring open minds to other services and departments as well. In short, so that we can—
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We shall start with our first question, and we'll start with Darwin. How will you support the city's youth commission? How will you ensure that voices of youth people are heard?
I think there's a really easy step one, and hopefully we all know what that is, and that's to listen to the youth and listen to their families and try to get their perspectives as best we can. I want to be elected, but I don't want to be elected just so I can make decisions based on my own expertise or what I can gather. I want to do my best to always listen to everybody and hear their input and really let folks who have a stake in any kind of situation be the folks who we listen to and who guide us. I think that it's a problem that we've seen in a lot of governments where we get elected and maybe we come from a certain background that isn't representative of some of the people that we are representing. And even if we have good intentions and we want to do what's best for them and for everybody who elected us, we just don't have the lived experience or the expertise or just the stake in the matter to address it well. So I'm going to listen to the youth and listen to their families and try to make a good plan from that point forward.
Thank you. And Todd, could you answer the question?
Yes, I'm happy to. Well, the youth I listen to every day. My kids just graduated from Berkeley High School, and I've been really enthusiastic about their whole career through Berkeley Public Schools, from kindergarten on up. I mean, it's just been a real opportunity. I don't know if you have the opportunity to look at the graduation ceremony online these days, but it looks like the United Nations, even more diverse than the United Nations, actually. I was just so grateful to have the opportunity to have my kids be in a public school system like that. So I know what it means to listen to youth. I support the change in the voting age that I believe is under consideration or on the ballot to allow people who will be turn 18 before the election to vote in the primary earlier that year. And I also think that in terms of government effectiveness for our young people, we need to make sure that our programs for them are actually working and track results.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Yes, thank you very much. I also have my own 3 recent Berkeley High graduates with opinions. And I am a Berkeley High graduate myself. So we've been a family deeply immersed in the Berkeley public school system for several generations. I have appointed Berkeley High School students to the Youth Commission and have met with them outside of their commission work to hear their ideas and get their input. I also have had a number of Berkeley High and other high school interns in my office, and actually one of my 2 current staff people is a relatively recent Berkeley High grad who also graduated from UC Berkeley. But in general, I think on all policy, the most important thing for us to do is consult with the community. So consulting with youth on things that impact youth is very important to me, and something that I already do routinely, not just through informal channels, but through the commission as well.
Okay, for the next question, we will start with Todd. What specific measures will you take to increase housing and address homelessness in the district?
Just in the district? Okay. Well, when it comes to housing, we need an all of the above approach. Had I been on the council, for instance, I probably would have voted yes on the 2190, 274 units above the BART station downtown. There were lots, speaking of young people, on the last question, there were like 50 young people that came out to speak in favor of that project. So I would vote yes on projects like that. It was destined to commit, and it still is. Thankfully, it passed with 6 yes votes. To donate more than $10 million to the Housing Trust Fund, which can be leveraged 4 or 5 times to build affordable housing. So we need to support that kind of thing and get behind it. The Herald Way project, I also would have been vocal in supporting, which would have donated over $10 million to the Housing Trust Fund and all the affordable housing that would have resulted in addition to being a project labor agreement, supporting hardworking community members. Thanks.
Thank you. And now, Sophie.
Well, thank you very much. In 10 years of working on land use in Berkeley, between myself and my appointee to the zoning board, I have counted that we have approved around 8,000 units of housing. I myself had voted no on a few. Not every single unit of housing that has been put before me did I think was worthy of being approved. I just want to correct for the record, Mr. Andrews constantly refers to the Herald Way project. Mr. Andrews, I didn't oppose that project. So I think you might want to take that off your list. But I did vote no on one project downtown, no affordable housing, too much parking, and took away a public view. Now to the question of what to do in the district, ADUs, I'm working on affordable housing on Solano Avenue and working actively on affordable housing project at the corner of Cedar and Spruce. So there, I'm sorry, not Spruce, Cedar and Oxford, excuse me.
Okay,
Anyway,
thank you.
Lots of housing approved.
Thank you. And now, Darwin.
As somebody who comes from West Virginia, a state that has less unhoused people in the entire state than we have right here in Berkeley, and we also have a lot less millionaires in general, it is kind of shocking to me. I think that outrage is sort of an appropriate thing to feel at a point in time when we keep seeing the unhoused population rise so rapidly, while our leaders, many of whom ran on the idea of decreasing that number, have watched it go up and gone so far as to claim it was a good thing that it hasn't increased as fast as Oakland or San Francisco. So I think the first thing is to just say, hey, we cannot accept this. I'm so lucky to live. I rent half a bedroom. I'm very meager means, but I'm so lucky to have a home in a situation. But other people don't, and I really cannot rest until they do. So I want to build everything I can do. I want to get my hands dirty. I will, if I'm elected, I'll be out there with a hammer and nail building housing myself, if that's what it takes to get people housed.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. For our next question, we'll start with Sophie. What is your plan to address gun violence in District 2?
Well, first of all, I would work with my colleague in District 2. So as the council member for District 5, it's not really my place to make that plan for my council colleague. So collaborating with my council colleague, and I have already done that in the past, hold forums. We've put cameras up in locations where there's been gun violence, working with our police to increase outreach. Not only is there, has there been more murders, but there's also more incarcerated folks who come from that district. So we have to provide wraparound support, social services, help with school, health, addressing health issues, and the total well-being of people in that district who have been neglected systematically for many, many years.
Thank you. And then Darwin, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, Sophie, I'm glad you bring up working with District 2. I'm a big fan, if you want to call it, of Cheryl Davila, and she's just been somebody who I've found really easy to talk to and will listen. And this is not a problem that we can address by small things. This is really a deep systemic issue, like you said. And I think a lot of it just needs to revolve around the way police interact with our communities. And I know that Cheryl and Ben Bartlett's, who's also running, were opposed to the Urban Shield in 2018, whereas some candidates, Sophie yourself, went against Cheryl and sort of does this kind of thing where you're telling a community, hey, we're gonna take police and give them this militarized training. Even if we think there's no way out of a contract or whatever, I think we really need to back up our community and say, hey, we are with you. We understand things are not right. Let's take drastic measures to help you feel good as a community. What can we do? And then I think we just have to look at the way we police and the way we criminalize things too. Obviously, drugs are a big part of it. And I think we should start looking at ways we can maybe be decreasing the amount of criminalization on that front.
Thank you. And Todd.
Yes, thank you for the question. I also would work with the D2 council member because they live there and they have the bird's eye view, so to speak. I was really encouraged by the fact that BPD now has bike patrols back. And so I hope that and it allows them to become more in touch with the community. I think the re-examining of policing and public safety is really important. I support the Berkeley Department of Transportation effort. I support the effort to re-examine and reimagine addressing homelessness and mental health and substance use disorder calls. But at the same time, I think it's a good indication that we need to be cautious as to how we move forward. So community members, victims, bystanders, HHS, Housing, Health, and Human Services people are protected and that they are not put in harm's way. And I would just work with the community members as well, as always, to see what we can do, because there are a lot of ideas that come from the ground up a lot of times that are the best ideas out there. Thanks.
Thank you. So for our next question, we'll start with Darwin. What is your position on new development and how will you manage thoroughfares to deter traffic?
We have to develop. It's really important to keep our green spaces. It's really important to keep Berkeley what Berkeley is. But when you've got a housing crisis, you've got to build and you've got to develop. And I think that we can turn to a lot of different creative ways to look at the way traffic moves about a city. Of course, I'd love to see our density go up in different areas. So you can have more people living in an area and using just foot traffic to get around. I think the other candidates, both point that out, that it's important to be able to use bikes and to walk. I walk a couple hundred miles a month in Berkeley and I love it. And when I do bike sometimes, like I know Todd, you're a cyclist, I'm a little afraid. It's not a really fun environment sometimes on these streets. So yeah, I think we just have to be creative and we have to approve things. We have to approve the right things. But we have to keep it going. I want to see more housing built and development in general. And to do it, we've got to sit down, agree, and move forward.
Thank you. And Todd, could you answer the question?
So I think these issues are intimately connected. The issue that you raise is intimately connected with climate change. And Darwin brought up one aspect of it, which is increasing density, which we need for housing equity due to the historical nature. And maybe we'll get to that later in the discussion of housing in the city. But we have to try and encourage people to the extent possible to move out of their cars. And we need to be careful about this because some people don't feel they can take public transportation or have mobility issues otherwise. They can't ride bikes, they can't ride scooters. That's an issue. Maybe they can't even walk. So we have to be very concerned about equity and inclusion as we do this and try and transition people into more shared transportation. It doesn't have to all be public transportation. I love the AAA gig car thing, and we could expand on that. But I think getting people out of their cars and more slow streets is something we need to consider going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Well, thank you very much. I support the addition of significantly more market rate and affordable housing for Berkeley. And I've done a lot to make that happen, but I'm particularly focused on affordable housing. As Darwin mentioned, we need to house the homeless. There's no way they're ever going to afford market rate housing. So my focus on the council has been on affordable housing. 96% of our housing is market rate. We need more, but we really need the affordable housing. So, not only did I write a very progressive affordable housing plan for Berkeley, but I co-wrote measures O and P, getting us $200 million for affordable housing and homeless services and rehousing services. So you got to be able to put the money where your ideas are, and I've done that. On transit, I think we need to take even bolder steps than we have before. I would like to look into whether we can take some of our bike boulevards and actually close off a whole lane and make really, really comfortable, easy bike boulevards so that, everybody, not just avid bike riders, feels comfortable riding bikes in Berkeley.
Thank you. Okay, for this next question, we shall start with Todd. Do you support rent control for single-family houses? If so, why?
I think that, again, it's kind of an all of the above type approach for housing. I mean, we need to protect tenants. We need to build more housing. We need to build more housing, as far as I'm concerned, for purchase, and make sure we have some BMR units and some financing available for purchase. If you throw BMR, or if you throw financing support behind existing units, for instance, it just tends to be a price support mechanism. So we've got to build more housing, I think, for ownership, and that would go great in District 5. In terms of rent control for single family units, I think that we need to be careful about how we do that, but I would support rent control for single family units under certain circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sophie?
Yes, thank you very much. That's an easy one for me. Yes, if they're being used as income property and not for the owner's primary residence. So we, especially after the mortgage crisis, a lot of single family homes throughout the country, and including here in Berkeley, have been bought up as income properties by people who have no intention of living in them as their own home. So when you have a rental that is an income property, it absolutely should be subject to rent control. When you own your own home and you live in it, 99% of the time, and maybe you rent it out for a year or two because you're going on a sabbatical or something, then I do not think it should be subject to rent control. But that's only for a term rental, not short term like Airbnb, but a rental that's for a fixed term. I don't think so.
Thank you. And Darwin?
Well said, Sophie. I agree completely. I think that's a really good approach. And maybe that's the easy one when we're talking about the single. And it's when you start talking about over 2 and someone has 3 and 4. And it's easy for me, in my mind, I tend to want to say, rent control is really important to keep people housed. We want to keep going in the right direction and not have more people on the street. But then when I'm, talking to people in the city, I meet people who own 4 houses, and they say, hey, I get it, but I'm putting a lot of money into these homes, and if I can't recoup, then I just have to sell. And so I want to be sympathetic to them too. And that's when I started thinking about we need to look in sometimes at relief so that people can charge a rent that they can stay in business essentially, but people are still in their homes. So I know we have all kinds of areas where we need help on the budget, and it's hard to think about a whole lot of different relief packages, but I think there's a way, and I think we should try to work on it.
Okay, thank you. So for this next question, we shall start with Sophie. Are there measures besides prohibiting natural gas in new construction that would be more effective in addressing climate change? The questioner feels that new residents and new businesses are being unfairly penalized.
Well, certainly addressing the natural gas issue is not the only issue we have for climate change. But it is actually very important. Now that we have 100% clean and renewable energy available through East Bay Community Energy to every single energy user in Berkeley, natural gas is actually a very bad, environmentally bad way to get your energy. So not in the production, in the transport, there's a lot of leakage. And then actually in the actual homes and residences, natural gas, there is leakage. It creates bad air quality, and there's a lot of reasons that it's not great. Lots of other measures that we should be doing with respect to buildings, and then also with transit. We've actually been very successful in the last 5 years in significantly reducing our emissions from buildings, in particular through EBCE. And now the next frontier for us is to look at transit.
Okay, thank you very much. And Darwin.
So I think the biggest overlooked issue when it comes to the environmental crisis that we're living in right now that threatens the future of our future generations is in terms of being overlooked is definitely our food system. I think that it accounts for so much. Arguably, people talk about animal agriculture accounting for like 15 to 49% of greenhouse gases. And so we're really thinking a lot about our fossil fuels and different energy sources. But what I want to do is I want to see us push for a statewide moratorium on new factory farms and slaughterhouses. So Berkeley is a place where we have a lot of restaurants. Maybe they're geared towards affluent folks, or people have, backyard gardens and everything like that. That is absolutely great. But we have a planetary crisis that we need to address. And if we keep building factory farms in the state of California, it's just going to accelerate that. And we know who is affected the most marginalized people on the planet who will be thrown into refugee status.
Okay, thank you. And Todd.
Thanks, Elisa. I just want to say, I think we had some agreement on that single family residence rent control thing. I support when there's large landlords or corporate, after the crisis, the housing crisis that was caused by the Great Recession, it was terrible for me to watch all the buying up of properties that were done and now converting them to rentals. So under those circumstances, yeah, that's a great idea. And then we've got to be careful about people who just want to go on a sabbatical or go on a trip. But in terms of the electrification of housing and other structures, I went to a Spur event in downtown Oakland, and one of the panelists said that even if every coal plant in California every power plant in California were coal-fired, it would be worthwhile to electrify every structure in California. And while I agree with Mr. Picklesimer that we've got to look just beyond transportation and housing, that's kind of what we can control locally. And so I would say, it's important to look at ways to electrify as many buildings as possible and equalize existing versus new construction somehow. Thank you.
Thank you. So for this next question, we shall start with Darwin. How will you ensure that District 5 residents will be able to safely evacuate during natural disasters like wildfires or earthquakes?
That's a great question. This is something that I really appreciate about Councilmember Hahn. Sophie doesn't let a lot of opportunities to address the need to address these things that aren't happening right now, but they're gonna happen. And I think we need to always make space to think about those things. And I think a lot of it's, some of it's fairly obvious. We need to have communication channels. We need to actually, I believe, advertise to everyone ways that they can be prepared for things that involve ham radios and like 72-hour go bags. All those things, like, they are important. I've got my go bag in the closet, and I use it for backpacking too. But just education, reach out to all the different groups in the area and just make sure we are all thinking about this. And because we can't predict what's going to happen or when, but we can just educate ourselves all along, and it'll serve us well.
Thank you. And Todd.
Thank you, Elise. When I think about this issue, I think of cars jammed on narrow roads, like happened in the Hills firestorm in '91, I think it was, which is just such a shame, the loss of life and property when that happens. So again, even now, I mean, we get efforts to tell people to park the cars as far to the median space as possible, or the right of way as possible, to allow space. I was just up there the other day, and driving on them it's kind of difficult sometimes, even under just normal circumstances. So it kind of comes back again for, I don't mean to sound like a Johnny one note, but reducing car use to the extent possible, and working with community members to get them excited about transitioning out of car use. And then we need to look at parking requirements as well. And that can happen now, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Well, this is something I've been working on since I was elected. We have allocated an extra $1 million to wildfire prevention activities, clearing brush and reducing fuel loads so that fires, don't accelerate to begin with. Measure FF, which I helped put on the ballot and am a very strong proponent of, would give us additional money to improve our communication system. We need to have multiple means of letting people know that an evacuation is necessary. We did our first evacuation drill last year. It was very successful. We need to do more of that. Our evacuation plans need to be better disseminated. I am piloting with the fire department something called Safe Passages, which is to make sure that our roads are passable in case of evacuation, not only for people to leave, but for our emergency services to be able to get up the hills into the fires. And also we need to red curb permanently in places where vehicles have trouble making turns. So all of this is in progress, and it's all things that I've been working on.
Thank you. So for this next question, we shall start with Todd. What is your position on defunding the Berkeley Police Department and specific plan for police reform? How would it specifically impact Berkeley residents and the law enforcement function?
I think this goes back to a little bit of overlap with the shooting question in D2 that was mentioned earlier. And it's so unfortunate what's happened in other cities around the country, the brutality and murder in some cases in Minneapolis and Louisville. I think that the reimagining, as I mentioned earlier, of policing to reduce the potential conflict, even though our police department is one of the best at de-escalation techniques, as far as I understand, in the country, ranked one of the top, I think, of 240 nationwide. Everybody gets trained in BPD. They come from Sacramento or wherever else, and then they get to go through de-escalation training here. I think continuing that process and making sure that we're focused on equity and inclusion, even when we transfer the process to Health and Human Services, we've got to be watching out for disparities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Sophie.
Well, thank you. I don't really like the word defund because I think it confuses people. I wrote legislation with the mayor, Councilmember Bartlett, and Councilmember Harrison to rethink security for everyone in Berkeley so that everyone can be and feel safe. And that means making some significant changes to the way we allocate our public safety dollars. The police are not the right response for everything. And that was true even before this wave of protests. I had already criticized using police to go out on mental health calls or to respond to very basic, homeless services needs. We have needed to diversify our emergency response for a long time. But we also need to invest more money in the kinds of programs that keep people from falling into crisis. So mental health services, additional support for our homeless to get them rehoused, and that will reduce the number of emergencies that we have in the first place.
Thank you. And Darwin.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think Sophie makes a good point about the word. Sometimes affects people in different ways. People talk about abolish the police sometimes too, and that's something that's maybe terrifying to some communities who really rely on police in times. I like to envision a future where we don't need the kind of police that are used right now, where we have a very radically different situation. And I think we can get there. But in the short term, in the time being, I think we really do need to adjust the budgets and do things that do put money in places where it'll help communities grow and feel safe and do good things. And I don't think that, the police aren't gonna, their presence doesn't stop the shootings, because people don't shoot when the police are standing there that often. And so we really have to address the issues systemically. And one thing that I'm working on, just to do a hands-on approach, I talked about building houses myself. I'm also putting together a team called the Total Liberation Rangers, which are just residents of Berkeley who go out and try to be out on the streets and just try to help people in de-escalate situations.
Thank you. So for this next question, we shall start with Sophie. What can be done to repair damaged sidewalks and potholes in District 5? What costs are borne by the city and which the property owner?
Well, we have a lot of work to do on our streets, that's for sure. And we commissioned a report on the status of our streets, and they're in poor repair. And when you want to redo them through a complete streets program where you have bike lanes and you have better green drainage and infrastructure, it actually costs a lot. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get a lot more money. And, we're not going to solve the problem without that. And that is really what we learned through the study that we commissioned. Unfortunately, with the economic downturn, I don't know when we'll be able to go out for that. But the PCI, the index in District 5 has actually been significantly improved overall in the last 4 years because a lot of paving has been done there. Sidewalks, that is theoretically the responsibility of the homeowner or the property owner. And that's one of the reasons why you see the sidewalk changes every couple of steps. We do have a program for some cost sharing between the city and homeowners, but sidewalks are the responsibility of the people who live in front of them.
All right. Thank you. And Darwin.
Yeah, thanks. So my campaign slogan, if you will, is called Theory of Revolution. And that's not just a corny play on my name being Darwin, but it is an observation that evolution takes time. It really does. And Sophie highlighted that a bit by just saying, hey, these things have a lot of bureaucracy and different costs associated that we can't just snap our fingers and make it happen. I think that we need change faster sometimes. And when it comes to big street projects, yeah, we've got to put in the work and do it certain ways. When it comes to small potholes in neighborhoods, I'll have an intake form on my own personal website and let me know where they're at. I'll come fix them. I don't have a problem doing that. And I understand that that might not be exactly the way things are supposed to be done technically, but when I'm done, you won't have a pothole and you can decide for yourself if you think that was a good thing or not. I got 11 seconds. I'll pass it along though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
thank you. And then Todd.
Thank you. Darwin, I want to get in touch with you on the street rangers or whatever it was. I want to learn about that. So streets are a passion of mine, and we had a $30 million bond in 2012 and another $100 million bond in 2016 that was supposedly going to address, among other things, admittedly, the quality of the streets. The pavement condition index, don't let me bore you to tears, but it's very important, has been almost level for the last 10 years. So somewhere we're not getting our money's worth on that. So when I hear somebody say they want to throw significantly more money at it through probably another huge bond measure, probably 200, 250, $300 million, I sort of am a little skeptical because the plan right now, even after those bond measures that I just mentioned, is for the pavement condition to get worse over the next 4 or 5 years, not better. So this is a passion of mine. We got to start examining results in the city. Public works and the streets are one area where we do it. We need to start doing it in other areas, but definitely we got to get this streets thing under control. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. All right, for this next question, we will start with Todd. What can you do to address issues that Black, Indigenous people of color are facing and make sure they are being represented in city policies?
There we go. So I think that, in Berkeley, it's one of the things that I believe we do really well. As I've mentioned before, I was so glad to have the opportunity to raise my kids in this environment where I think I said more diverse than the United Nations earlier. That would be pretty difficult to be more diverse, but you get my point. It's one of the things that I love about this area. I grew up in an area that was at the time, 97.5% white. And so we didn't have many people of color and Indigenous people around. And somehow I was raised by my family to always be open to that and always be questioning my assumptions. And we all have implicit bias, all of us, no matter who we are, no matter what kinds of policies we advocate for, no matter who we have as friends, no matter where we've been or haven't been, we all have implicit bias, and we have to every day, each one of us, examine what we're doing and saying and learn from the people who have lived lives of different experience than we have.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I make appointments to about 40 commissions, and my predecessor had only one commissioner who was not white, and I didn't count, but I have great diversity among my commissioners in terms of racial and ethnic background, age, and life experiences. So that's one way, is to really give people that opportunity to serve. Another is in my staff. 2 of my staff members have been people, I've had 4 total. 2 have been people of color. 1 has been openly gay. That's another way to support diversity. And then, of course, listening to all stakeholders and being present and really hearing what their concerns are, not just when they come to us, but also reaching out and getting their input proactively. We luckily have heard a lot recently about the needs and concerns of certain communities of color, and we are moving very quickly to address those concerns.
Thank you. And Darwin.
Yeah, really important question. Thank you for asking it. And I think that it's really important that we just honestly keep our framing correct and acknowledge always that, the land that we're on is amazing. I love this land. I love the people. I'm so happy to be a part of it. But I don't lose sight of the fact that it is on colonized land. It's Ohlone land originally. The United States, we are founded on slavery and so many horrible things. But that doesn't change the fact that we are people working together now, trying to make things as good as possible. And there's a lot of things you can say and do superficially, maybe, but you've got to share power. You've got to empower people to fill positions. If I'm elected, I don't want to be in office for a long time. I was sort of sad to see that everybody running was white. That this race is 3 white folks. I guess I'm assuming that, but I don't like that. If I were elected, I'd want to do my best to try to empower folks and look for my replacement from groups that are underrepresented historically on the council.
Thank you. Okay. Todd, could you?
Elise, you muted yourself in the middle of speaking and we couldn't hear the rest of the question.
I think I was the first one to address that question.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. We should go on to the next question. Sorry about that. Okay, let's start with Darwin. What action will you take to keep all safe from COVID-19, particularly vulnerable and at-risk populations?
Yeah, well, important question, obviously, right now, and I think the city is on to a lot of things when it comes to what they say they want to do, and that's increase testing and education. I think we have a lot of room to grow in that area. Personally, if I want to be tested, I find the easiest thing to do is to go to Treasure Island. I have not found Berkeley to be a place that it's easy to find testing without a few days notice on the appointment and then advertised to like a 3 to 5 day turnaround, sometimes a little quicker. But that's not good. I think maybe I'm ignorant. Other I'm missing out on the great places to be tested in the city, but that's again a reflection of us having room to grow in that area. Because I know my friends and other people in the city aren't particularly satisfied with how testing is going so far. So I would look to areas and I would just set standards. I would say, hey, we want to be able to get an appointment within 24 hours and we want to be able to get results within 48 hours. Of course, walk up and instantaneous is the best. And, but we are fairly far from that right now. And I think we got to get a lot better.
Okay, thank you. And Todd.
Thanks, Elise. Well, first of all, we need Medicare for all, either at the federal level or the state, but I know we don't have control of that. I like what Darwin said about free testing, or at least I think he said that about free testing. Maybe I just jotted it down from my own head. And contact tracing, something we can't really do either, although I kind of wonder whether we could do it locally if we made a better effort. Outreach efforts to people outside. I love all the efforts that are taking place right now to get people water and everything else. We know we can't bring too many people inside to enclosed quarters and they've got to stay distant. So the capacity of what we have now has been reduced. I mentioned in another call with another group the other day that if we're going to look at a building like Old City Hall downtown, even though it's seismically unsafe for emergency access to vulnerable people during smoke emergencies, fire emergencies, you name it, COVID, we have to look at the empty building on Oxford. And I'll just come right out and say it. We got to look at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think we've done an incredible job in Berkeley addressing the COVID crisis and keeping, flattening the curve and keeping as many people safe as possible. And I'm really very proud of the work that I've done, the council, and our staff. Testing, we have free testing in Berkeley. Check the site. There's a variety of different ways, walk up, drive up, etc. You can also get it through your private insurance. It's not like tests exist and everybody had this all set up. Berkeley moved very quickly. We partnered with UC Berkeley. We deployed testing very early, and we've now diversified our testing opportunities, and we're constantly improving testing. So it's not something unique to Berkeley to have those challenges, and I think everyone knows that. Contact tracing. Todd, you'll be delighted to know that we have our own health department, and we are doing extensive contact tracing. We've also taken big steps to reach out to our Spanish-speaking population, which has been heavy hit by COVID. And I wish I had another minute. I could tell you just a little bit about what we've been doing around our homeless, but you notice we have not had outbreaks among our homeless, and that tells you that we're doing the right things.
Thank you. So Sophie, we will start with you for this question. What is your position on Prop 15, which will increase taxes on commercial properties, and why?
I'm in favor of Prop 15. Everybody else has had their taxes increased already. And I think it's quite well known that in California, because commercial properties tend to turn over less than residential properties, as a proportion of property tax, the amount paid by commercial properties has gone down over time, and the total amount paid by residential properties has gone up. This is a very simple measure to try and rectify some of that imbalance and have our business community and our commercial property owners pay their fair share. Think about something like Chevron in Richmond. They have owned that property forever. That is a big property. They've never sold it, and they probably never will, although I would love for us to no longer be processing petroleum or distributing it. So maybe someday they will. But,
Thank you.
Their
Thank
property
you.
taxes as compared to residents are very small, and that's not right.
Okay. And Darwin.
Yeah, again, I think Sophie makes a good point. I'll just come out and say that I think I need to do more learning on this issue. I don't feel that I'm in a position to have a really qualified answer yet. And but in general, yeah, I think that we do need to look for balance. And you know, we live in a country certainly where you see the biggest corporations paying the lowest rates often, and that's terrible. You know, so I think we do have to find ways to separate the chevrons from the smaller businesses, of course, and try to figure out what's going to work in that way. And it shouldn't be too hard because the chevron numbers are going to be so much higher that I think we can put, you know, just systems in place to where we are taxing people fairly and being sure that no one's, you know, using a commercial business to just rake in a ton of money and not help and support the community, because we definitely have to do this all together.
Thank you. And Todd.
I think we're having a lot of agreement and convergence on this issue. I wasn't even aware that it was just the lack of turnover. I was, from my knowledge of the situation, there's a gaming of the system that occurs in the way that titles to properties are transferred, so that even if it does turn over, it can be gamed and the property assessed value stay low and thus taxes stay low. So yes, I definitely support Prop 15 as an equity measure. I was a little concerned about the potential impact on small businesses, but my understanding is that with the way the tax is applied to those landlords, that small businesses will, for the most part, not experience too much of a negative impact from the test, because they're being hit hard enough by COVID. So that was important to me in the evaluation of Prop 15, but yes, I support it.
For the next question, we will start with Todd. Are you a renter or house owner? And do you own any other property in Berkeley? And how will this affect your decisions?
Yeah, I've been in my current apartment now for 14 years as a rent control protected tenant. Prior to that, I was helping my wife continue the ownership of her home that she had owned since 1996. I moved in there in 1999 and went on title shortly thereafter. And prior to that, I bumped around a lot of places since '88, trying to keep my rent low. So, and combined with my career as a realtor, I think that I've got a fairly unique perspective, especially in D5, but probably almost everywhere, on housing and what it means to struggle to buy a property if you're buying, because many clients of mine have struggled to buy, struggle to manage a property if you own a small property, especially if you're a small unit owner who lives in the same building as your tenant does. And struggles to pay rent. So I can understand it from all the perspectives, and I bring a lot of balance, I'd like to think, as a result.
Okay, thank you. And Sophie.
Well, I am a homeowner, and I do not own any other property in Berkeley, but I have also been a renter in Berkeley. I lived in a rented apartment on Oxford Street. I lived on Delaware Street in a rental, and on College Avenue. So I've been both. In fact, I've lived in Berkeley most of my life. So I have a lot of different perspectives that I bring to the work that I do on the council. I have been a very strong supporter of renters and renters' rights and rent control. And I also understand the perspective of homeowners. So I think that my long tenure in Berkeley, and you know, I went to the Berkeley Public Schools. I am a Cal graduate. I've raised my own kids here in this community. So I think my deep roots in Berkeley and my varied experiences and perspectives really helped me as a council member.
Okay, thank you very much. And Darwin.
Definitely a renter. I probably won't own a home anytime in my life. I don't expect. My income is $35,000 a year before taxes. And I don't know how to technically classify it, but I would think of myself as housing insecure, to the extent that if my current housing situation didn't exist suddenly, I would really struggle to find adequate housing on my budget. And yeah, I think that actually gives me a really good perspective that hopefully can identify with people who are on the cusp and do really have a sense of urgency about fixing the affordable housing crisis and the unhoused situation that we have. Because the person I rent from, they're a homeowner and they're amazing. Some people have animosity towards quote unquote like rich folks. I don't have that at all. I love everybody. I think people have really good hearts, but I do think it's easy sometimes to get somewhat comfortable if you have a certain level of housing security to where you're willing to not address the issue as tenaciously as it deserves.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, then our next question will be for Darwin as well. Where do you stand with Berkeley's Measure MM? This is the amendment of rent stabilization.
I'm ignorant to MM at the moment. It was kind of funny because I do canvassing for another candidate, mayoral candidate Wayne Chung. And like I said before, I haven't launched my campaign yet, and I'm doing homework. And people are like saying like MM. I'm literally ignorant to the topic, aside from looking at the basic voter guides, and I need to dig deeper. So I frankly am just absolutely unprepared to answer that question, and I look forward to being prepared to answer it again in the future. With that said, I'll pass my time to the next speaker.
Okay, and Todd, could you address the question?
Sure. Just a little background on this. It was promulgated by an independent rent board, which wanted to also include a rescission of the exemption from rent control on golden duplexes, which combined with the ADU exemption, voters kind of weighed in on in 2018. They overwhelmingly supported the exemption. So big picture, I think there's a disconnect between this independent rent board, unlike Oakland and San Francisco, where the rent board is under the authority of city council. I think there's a disconnect here between our independent rent board and our city council on housing policy. And I don't want to balance the housing crisis on the backs of small property owners. I think we have to really, really, really be careful about that, especially if we're not doing everything we can to promote more supply in the city. We have to really be careful about balancing. So I'm not in support of Measure M.
Okay, and Sophie.
Well, thank you. As a council member, I voted to put Measure MM on the ballot, and I helped shape it. And so I do support it, and I'm actually surprised to hear a colleague who doesn't. First of all, it protects tenants who cannot pay rent due to the COVID crisis, which I think is incredibly important. And secondly, it requires the owners of units that are not subject to rent control, but are subject to eviction controls, to register with the rent board. Those owners and people in those units already avail themselves of the services of the rent board, but no fee is paid for that service. So I think it's very fair and warranted. I also think that having a rent board that is looking out for the interests of renters is not a bad thing. We have a lot of services that we provide. The rent board provides them to owners as well as renters. But okay. I certainly support the work of the rent board.
Okay, and Sophie, I think this will be this will be our last question, and we'll start with you. This is also a question about one of the measures. So where do you stand on Measure JJ, the charter amendment regarding compensation for the mayor and council members?
Well, I'm a very strong supporter of that as well, and I voted to put that on the ballot. Council members make around $36,000 a year, and originally it was considered kind of a part-time job. But the number of hours that are required of us in meetings and in committee meetings, and the number of constituent service requests that we get, which are well into the thousands every year, and we respond to, mean that the job has taken on much more significant responsibilities. It is a very important equity issue for us to pay enough so that low-income people and people of color who traditionally have been more low income because of discrimination in our society can afford to serve on the Berkeley City Council. Council members can still not take their salary, which is what I already do. But for those who need it, we need to have fair pay for the work that's done on behalf of the city.
Okay, thank you. And Darwin.
Well, like I said, I'm already on 35,000 and I'm living okay. I live a very meager lifestyle, but I'm sympathetic to the point that Sophie makes that you do want to have an accessible position to people. So what if you're a working, family person, you've got children to raise, you've got bills. We don't want to create a situation where people can't hold public office. I'm an activist and I get by on very little, and I take part in civil disobedience. And I think that's very important. But I think what's even more important, first and foremost, is civil engagement. And I think we need to make that accessible to as many people as possible. So it's hard to, I would really hope that people would do their best, because I also believe that idea that we don't get seconds before someone else gets firsts. So as much as I think it is important for people to have access to the position, it's really hard when you look around and there's residents living on the streets and you ask yourself like, well, if you can build a tiny home for $10,000, do you really want to get somebody in a home, or do you want to increase the compensation for somebody who's serving the city?
Okay, thank you. And Todd.
Thank you. I just want to address Councilmember Hahn's comments on Measure MM. I would support more data gathering too, but the problem is the ideologically driven rent board combined it with this measure to balance the housing crisis on the backs of small property owners. Sure, we can gather more information, and sure, people deserve protection from COVID, but they had to go that extra step and reverse something the voters approved essentially 2 years ago. But on council compensation, I think it's generally a good idea. I am a homeless commissioner, and I led an effort on the Homeless Commission to expand subsidies to low-income commissioners, not just housing homeless commission commissioners, but throughout the city, because I think that an income threshold of $20,000 and a subsidy of $40 or whatever it was is way too low. But I don't think this is the right time to do this. We're in the midst of a $40 million budget crisis. It's only going to get worse now in this city. I think we need to hold off on it, though I would support it eventually.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, before the candidates give their closing statements, I have a few remarks on behalf of the LWV-BAE. Thank you to the candidates for running for office and for your participation this evening. I also want to thank the audience for engaging in our democracy. For further information about upcoming forums, the candidates, pros and cons, and positions on ballot measures, please visit the League's website, lwvbae.org or votersedge.org/ca. We invite you to join the League to help us engage voters and defend democracy. We do so much more than voter registration and education. Visit our website and social media accounts at LWVBAE. The deadline to register to vote is October 19th this year. You can register to vote online at the Secretary of State's website, sos.ca.gov. Remember to vote by mail or at the polls by Tuesday, November 3rd. This year, we are encouraging voters to vote as early as possible. Please see our website for more information about voting in this election. Now, the candidates will make closing statements. We will reverse the order that we began with, and each candidate will give a closing statement of 1 minute. So we shall start with Todd.
Hi, thanks again, everybody, and thanks again for the work that the League of Women Voters does to educate and bring people along, facilitating democracy. Those who know me well know that I'm pretty fiercely independent, but I'm honored to have the endorsements of former District 2 Councilmember Daryl Moore, former Councilmember Lori Capitelli from District 5, former Zoning and Adjustments Board Chair Christiana Tiedemann, and Public Works Commissioner and Solar Industry Specialist Sachu Constantine. I'm running because if we believe government can do good things, then we've got to have good government. As we deal with the problems of COVID-19, affordable housing, homelessness, climate change, the list goes on, I'll bring a mindset of flexible, creative problem solving to make sure we're focused on evidence-based policymaking and results. Thanks again. Please be kind to each other and stay safe.
Thank you. And next, Darwin.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to do this. This has been an exciting experience for me. I love the opportunity to connect with your audience, and it's been an honor to just share this Zoom call with the other candidates. I wish we could do it in person, maybe next year, maybe the year after, let's hope. And the thing that's important to me, though, that I really think we need to draw out and understand is that what's happening in Berkeley lately when we see just the direction that things are going, it's Todd, you mentioned evidence-based. If you look at affordable housing, if you look at rents, if you look at the number of unhoused people, I don't think that we can afford to move forward at the pace that we're going. I want to come in and be part of the change. I've been in a roofing company that was the best roofing company in our area. I was the produce manager of, in my opinion, the best produce department of the 35 in our chain. And I've, for 3 years now, been on the elected leadership team of our animal rights group, Direct Action Everywhere, which I believe is the best animal rights group on the planet. I want to bring my skills to the city of Berkeley, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Well, thank you to the League for organizing this opportunity to speak with voters about my record and vision. I really appreciate the time it takes to put these forums together, and especially doing it remotely. I invite voters to visit my website, sophiehahn.com, and reach out to me directly. My contact information is on the website if you have specific questions. I would be honored to continue my work on behalf of District 5 and all of Berkeley. I'm very proud to be endorsed by the Democratic Party, the Sierra Club, California Nurses Association, National Association of Healthcare Workers, East Bay Working Families, Berkeley Firefighters Association, Alameda Labor Council, SEIU, East Bay Young Dems, the Wellstone Club, Berkeley Progressive Alliance, Berkeley Citizens Action, Mayor Jesse Adeguin and council colleagues, Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, Albany Mayor Nick Pilch, California State Superintendent Tony Thurman, State Controller Betty Yee, Malia Cohn, Keith Carson, and many other elected officials, as well as neighbors across the city.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. If we were in person, we could give our candidates a round of applause, but I will thank them for you. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And good night.